All right, joining us now from Minneapolis is Amy Fredricksen, a Republican political strategist. We also have Hannah Safford in Washington, D.C. She's a former senior policy advisor at the White House Climate Policy Office under the Biden administration. It is great to have you both. It is great to have this debate. Hannah, we'll start with you. The Trump administration says the result of this policy change will be a $2,400 savings for the average American when they go to buy a new car. What do you think the environmental impact will be, though?
Well, first, I would say that savings is a little unclear where the administration is getting the numbers for those savings from. The information behind that's not totally clear, and it relies on kind of some questionable assumptions about where gas prices might go in the future. When it comes to the environmental impacts of the rollbacks, certainly the Clean Air Act and the endangerment finding is really, as you heard before, the bedrock of a lot of the way that we've done climate policy to date. At the same time, the costs of clean energy and the cost of clean technology like cars is coming down. And so I do expect that people are going to continue buying cleaner vehicles and cleaner technologies in increasing numbers, even if they're not pushed to do that by regulation.
Amy, do you agree?
Well, look, I think that the decision today is more about process than it is about the impact on climate. It's not a decision on whether or not we should have climate policy. We should, but it's about who decided it. And the findings really put in motion decades of sweeping reforms or sweeping regulation that was largely done by regulators and bureaucrats and not by, deciders like lawmakers and presidents that are elected by people. And I just think that when you're making these big policy decisions, that should be put in the hands of the people that, are elected to make those big decisions.
Okay,
especially something of this magnitude.
Yeah, so Hannah, Amy brings up a good point here, because basically the EPA administrator, Lee Zeldin, is saying that, look, this was a stretch to say that the Clean Air Act should cover the harms that greenhouse gases are causing via climate change. They say that's a bit of a stretch. It's a bit of a loose interpretation of what the law actually says. They say that they are reading the law as it is plainly written. So shouldn't it be incumbent on Congress to just rewrite the law if they want to have stricter emission standards?
Well, I would say the Clean Air Act, the text of the Clean Air Act specifies 6 criteria pollutants by name that EPA needs to regulate under the Clean Air Act. So there's no dispute about those. Then the Clean Air Act also says that EPA has got a mandate in terms of protecting individual health, the health of communities, the health of environment, to also regulate hazardous air pollutants. Now, science is constantly evolving, and we are having new understanding all the time of what hazardous air pollutants are out there. So actually, EPA places limits on close to 200 different hazardous air pollutions. Those include everything like from toxic mercury to benzene, things that aren't specified in statute. It doesn't make sense to sort of specify a long list, because then when new pollutants came out, then you wouldn't know whether you should be regulating them. So some of these greenhouse gas emissions fall into that same category of, again, close to 200 other pollutants that aren't specified in statute, but EPA regulates nonetheless.
But sorry, Hannah, do you agree, though, that maybe the plain text of the Clean Air Act the interpretation of it has been stretched? Do you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that, because, again, EPA's mandate is to protect the public from hazardous air pollutants. The Supreme Court directed EPA to assess whether greenhouse gases provide a hazard to human and environmental health. Okay. The 2009 endangerment finding demonstrated that, and actually the administration is not questioning the merits of that endangerment finding on its scientific basis.
Amy, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that the question remains of what are we going to do about climate policy, and I feel it should be left in the hands of bureaucrats. But also, there's no way to deny that what has happened since the finding at the hands of the EPA has been like high costs imposed on manufacturing, energy, auto industries, and again imposed by an agency that wasn't elected. Not to say that there shouldn't be restrictions. I just think they should go through a different process. And you have to balance our environmental responsibility with affordability. The new buzzword here in America is affordability. Well, that's what I see this as a win for as well. And I'm a big person about innovation. I think that it's not going to be the government that solves the climate problem. I think it's going to be new companies, innovation that's driving this. And that's never going to happen at the hands of a bureaucrat at the EPA. It's going to happen in the hands of American people working, American jobs to make American money.
So, Hannah, do you think that Amy has a point that perhaps there should be some economic considerations given how Americans are being squeezed right now by the cost of living?
Oh, absolutely. And I completely agree with Amy that the bedrock of American progress and American economic competitiveness has always been innovation. And actually, one of, I think, the great benefits to performance standards like the emission standards set under the Clean Air Act is that they don't actually specify specific technology that you need to put into place to meet those standards. So under vehicle regulations that are set by the EPA, manufacturers are free to meet those by development of electric vehicle technology, by development of cleaner engine technology, by development of more efficient components, lighter weight vehicles, a whole host of innovations. And actually, it often works to our advantage when you say, this is the goal that we're trying to get towards. It's cleaner air, it's safer air for Americans, and it's up to you, innovators, to show us what's the best way to get there and to get there in a way that works for you and your cars.
Hannah, do big emitters like, say, and manufacturing countries like India and China have similarly strict regulations when it comes to greenhouse gases? And do you think that they should in order to level the playing field? Or do you think that maybe some punitive tariffs could sort of level the playing field in that respect?
I think it is important to look at climate policy as sort of a holistic package rather than focusing in quite narrowly on the comparison of sort of one policy to another policy between two countries. So sometimes it might happen that you're having higher subsidies for innovative industries that are sort of pushing the envelope further on clean energy technologies, and you're pairing that with sort of a different regulatory process. In the United States, and I'm sure Amy would agree with this here, regulatory standards are one pillar of an overall holistic policy package that also needs to include support for American workers who are powering the auto industry and other sort of key pillars of our economy that also happen to be some of the higher emitters in our economy. It also includes consideration of economic and tariff policies that feed into the overall economic transition.
Amy, the last question to you. I wonder, don't you think the U.S. might be better off if the goal here is cleaner air, less greenhouse gas emissions? Don't you think the U.S. would be better off to simply impose its regulations on or force, say, India or China into adopting the same regulations rather than just repealing those regulations?
Well, I think that that's an impossible goal to reach for. Instead, what we can do is make sure that we're not applying an undue burdensome tax that isn't necessarily driving the innovation and the policy changes that are required to actually do something about climate and to have a really robust, effective climate policy in the United States. And so instead of tying our hands, handcuffing us, or taxing ourselves to solve a problem that really is global. I agree with Hannah. Like, there's all pieces to this policy, but kind of settling it on one piece within the EPA and making just sweeping regulation based around it is doing the exact opposite of that. This opens it up. I think this is a win for the American consumer, American jobs, and the American economy, as well as the right move if Congress now takes the lead in moving forward with good climate policy.
All right, Amy Fredricksen, Hannah Safford, it's a fascinating discussion. Thank you both for your time.